All right, ready to dig into some essential reading for anyone interested in startups or just how companies grow in general. We're taking a deep dive into The Startup Owner's Manual, the book by Steve Blank and Bob Dorff. It's considered a must-read for a reason, and I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, this book was a bit of a game changer when it came out, for sure. It really challenged a lot of assumptions about how to build a successful business.
You've seen it firsthand. So what is it that makes the advice in this book so different, so impactful?
Well, a lot of it boils down to this. Blankendorf, they really highlight a fundamental difference in how established companies operate versus how startups operate.
And you've worked with both, so walk me through that. What's the difference?
It's about their primary focus. You see, a company that's already established, they've figured out their business model, they know it works, so their main goal is execution, right? It's about optimizing that model, making it as efficient and profitable as possible.
Okay, so kind of like fine-tuning a machine that's already running, but startups are a whole other ballgame, aren't they?
You got it. Startups are still in that search phase, you know. They're looking for that repeatable, scalable model that will let them grow. And one of the key takeaways from the Startup Owner's Manual is that you can't treat a startup like a smaller version of a big company.
It's like using a roadmap from, I don't know, New York City to try and find your way around a completely new town that's just starting to pop up. It's not going to get you very far.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So how does this book, how does it help us navigate that uncharted territory of building a startup?
Well, one of the most significant contributions this book makes is the concept of customer development.
Oh, customer development. Now, that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I'll admit I'm not always sure I could give you a clear definition.
Sure, sure. And it really flips the script on how we traditionally think about building a product or a business.
How so?
It's about bringing your potential customers into the process way earlier than you might think.
Instead of, what, holding yourself up with your team and trying to perfect something before anyone outside sees it.
Exactly. Because that can be a recipe for disaster, spending months, even years, on something only to realize nobody actually wants it.
In there.
Right. So customer development says, let's talk to those potential customers from the get-go. Let's find out what problems they're facing, what solutions they're already using, what they wish existed.
So you're not just building something and hoping they'll come, you're bringing them along for the ride.
Precisely. And the Startup Owner's Manual, it argues that even negative feedback from customers can be incredibly valuable at this stage.
Really? How so?
It's all about failing fast and adapting quickly. Negative feedback might not feel great, but it can save you a ton of time and resources. It helps you avoid wasting energy on a product or a feature that's, well, doomed to fail.
So you're constantly testing and iterating, incorporating that feedback into the development process.
It's like this constant feedback loop.
That sounds a lot more effective and, frankly, a lot less scary than just launching a product and crossing your fingers.
It's about de-risking the process, you know,
Yeah.
making sure that what you're building is something people actually want and need.
Makes sense. But the Startup Owner's Manual goes beyond just customer development, right? What other big ideas did Blankendorf introduce?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They also touch on agile development, which has become really influential even outside of the startup world.
Right. Agile development, I feel like that's everywhere these days. It's about being flexible, adapting to change quickly, right?
Exactly. So instead of that old waterfall method where you plan everything out in advance, spend months, sometimes years, building a product.
You mean before you even know if anyone's going to use it?
Exactly. Agile says, let's break the process down into smaller cycles, these sprints.
Okay, so you're constantly building, testing, getting feedback. It sounds kind of similar to the customer development loop, but applied to the actual development process.
You got it. That constant feedback loop is crucial. It lets you adapt, incorporate new information as you go, instead of getting stuck in, well, development hell.
Instead of ending up with a product that's already obsolete by the time it launches,
Right, exactly.
you're putting something out there, even if it's a basic version, and then using that real-world feedback to shape the next iteration.
Exactly. It's about getting that product in front of users as quickly as possible.
So agile development, it pairs really well with the whole customer development approach, right? They both prioritize flexibility, constant iteration.
Oh, absolutely. They go hand in hand. It's about being adaptable, responsive, all throughout the life of the startup. And speaking of adapting, another key idea from the Startup Owner's Manual is business model design.
Okay, business model design, this is where we ditch that big, long, formal business plan, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Because those traditional business plans, they can be so static, so resistant to change. Business model design is about challenging that. It helps you visualize, like really get a clear picture of all the core elements of your business.
Like, what? Give me some examples.
Sure, you've got your value proposition, right? What makes your product or service unique? Then you've got your customer segments. Who are you targeting? And your revenue streams. How will you actually make money? Business model design helps you see how all these pieces connect, and more importantly, how they can be adjusted and adapted as you learn.
So it's like a blueprint, but a dynamic one that can evolve as your understanding of the market evolves.
Exactly.
And that adaptability, that's got to be crucial, especially in the early days.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when things can change so quickly. You need to be able to pivot, change course based on what you're learning.
And this kind of ties into another big concept that the Startup Owner's Manual touches on, the whole lean startup movement.
Absolutely.
And that's become a huge part of how we think about startups today. So for those who might not be as familiar, what are the core principles of lean startup and how does it all connect to what we've been talking about?
So lean startup, it's about being scrappy, running lean, not being afraid to experiment. Yeah, it really embraces that experimental mindset. It's about building a culture where you're constantly testing your assumptions, you're measuring the results, and then you're using that data to make smarter decisions.
So instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis, you're saying, let's just put something out there and see what happens.
Exactly. The lean startup philosophy recognizes that you're going to learn a lot more by actually doing something, even if it's not perfect at first.
Get it out there, get that feedback.
Right. It's about validated learning, real-world data over just sitting around theorizing.
Makes sense.
And sometimes that learning means pivoting, which can be a key part of the lean startup journey.
And a pivot, that doesn't have to be a complete 180, right? Sometimes it's just a small adjustment, a tweak to your approach.
Exactly. Exactly. It could be anything from changing your target market to adjusting your pricing strategy, even just refining your messaging.
It's about being open to making those changes, even if it means moving away from your initial vision.
It can be tough, though. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get so attached to their original idea that they miss opportunities to adapt and improve.
Because they're afraid to let go of that initial vision.
Exactly. But the lean startup approach, it encourages you to stay flexible, to see those unexpected turns as opportunities rather than setbacks.
That's a good way to look at it. So when we pull all of this together, customer development, agile development, business model design, this lean startup mentality, it seems like the Startup Owner's Manual is really giving us a new way of thinking about building a business.
It's not just a set of tactics, it's a whole new mindset.
Right. It's about embracing uncertainty, being comfortable with iterating, with constantly learning and adapting.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that startups aren't just smaller versions of big companies, they're a different beast altogether.
And they need a different playbook.
Which is exactly what the Startup Owner's Manual provides.
It's amazing how influential this book has been, really shifting the conversation around startups.
It's had a huge impact, no doubt.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive, here's something I think is worth considering. These concepts we've been talking about, they're not just for tech companies or entrepreneurs. I think we can all benefit from applying a bit of that startup mindset in our own lives, in our careers.
Absolutely.
Whether you're launching a new project at work or even just trying to make a change in your personal life, ask yourself, what assumptions am I making? How could I test those? Who could I talk to get some real-world feedback?
Those are great questions to ask no matter what you're working on.
It's about approaching your goals with more agility, more creativity, and that willingness to learn and adapt as you go.
It's a great way to approach any challenge.
Great insights. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Startup Owner's Manual.